I think we are officially live. For those of you who are already joining us, thank you very much for taking the time. We're going to give it a minute or two to allow everyone to just trickle in, and then we'll get started proper.
Mike, you're the only one with a visible chin due to these name tags.
Wow. It's a good thing I have a decent chin.
That's a good thing.
That could be.
Can we hear in the chat where people in the world, where in the world people are dialing in from?
I keep forgetting. What time is it in Australia right now? New Zealand?
New Zealand?
New Zealand, it's 7 a.m.
But Crystal's up at like 5 in Melbourne.
Oh, I lived in Atlanta. There was actually the one day I opened up the door at 5 a.m. and the heat and humidity hit me so hard in the face, I closed the door and went back to bed.
And then moved to
Seems
Virginia.
like a fair response.
That was the absolute best response I could come up with at the time.
Okay, we have quite a large geographical spread, judging from the chats. I think it's 7:02. I think we're about ready to get started. So allow me to kick things off. First of all, welcome everyone to the webinar. AI and automation for legal ops is our topic today, and I am very happy to be joined by true leaders in that field, Adam Bluestein and Mike Vitko. Adam, Mike, would you take a minute to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, good afternoon or morning, everybody. I'm Adam. I'm a customer success manager at LawVu. Been here for about 4 years and deal every day with customers and folks like yourselves interested in automation and AI. One of those customers is Mike. We've worked together for about 4 years. And I'll just say this, I rarely see Mike on camera because every day or every week, he's prompting a new, funny, scary. This week, he said, background image for his team calls. So Mike, it's good to be with you today. Seriously, thanks for your time and feel free to introduce yourself as well.
However, we're going to have to delete this recording when it's all said and done. I can't have my image going out like that. Name's Mike Vitko, Senior Manager, Legal Operations at Somatis. Been there for over 5 years and in the legal ops space for just about 8. So.
Awesome. Maybe from my side as well, my name's Senna. I am the customer success lead at LawVu. I used to be the co-founder of Clausebase, which is a company that was acquired by LawVu late last year. And so in that capacity, I'm basically responsible for making sure that the transition from Clausebase into LawVu goes smoothly as possible. For today, however, I will primarily take up the role as your host of the webinar. So in that spirit, just a couple of housekeeping rules. So right now, all attendees are muted, but you are welcome to pop any question that you may have in the chat. We have about 15 minutes at the end of the webinar reserved for questions, but we can go over if you can. The webinar is being recorded, so you will receive the recording. If this is something you'd like to reach out earlier, if you have a hard stop or anything like that, and don't hesitate if that is the case to do pop in your questions. We'll try to get to every single one of them if we have the time. So we're talking about AI and automation in legal ops, and a big part of the reason why we're talking about that is because legal teams are still losing a lot of valuable time, just general inefficient processes, a lot of manual labor, sort of production work that doesn't necessarily move the needle. We're looking at research from an IDC white paper sponsored by LawVu, where we're actually seeing that kind of impact on that sort of loss of time, that sort of inefficiency. Just curious in general, Mike, Adam, whether these are things that you're experiencing in your daily life as well.
I mean, for me, the administrative tasks are always death by 1,000 cuts. So anywhere where you can, minimize the back and forth that something else could take care of would have been highly helpful in our situation.
And I'm seeing the inverse in terms of how it's measured. So when folks get into AI, start talking about the time they believe they've saved from that perspective, rather than perhaps the time administrative tasks are taking now, giving feedback on time saved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm also curious, by the way, while we're on the topic, whether this is not just the experience of the people that we have on stage right now, but also the people in the chat. I am curious to kind of just quickly poll your opinion on just general AI maturity and just kind of how your organization is addressing some of these challenges using this sort of new technology that obviously opens up a lot of different avenues for solutions that 2 or 3 years ago were basically just science fiction. And so you should be able to see a poll pop up now. Just curious if you can just identify kind of what statement you feel most aligned with. It's always funny to have these to have these polls in webinars like these. I find that the change of pace is so rapid that you can have a webinar on this kind of stuff in December of last year, and then have it now and just kind of see that evolution that's spread. Curious if we'll be seeing that as well. Not sure if we are getting so we are seeing some results trickle in right now. I have some business units are using it but not formalized, as about halfway of the votes. We have a single vote for core to our strategy and competitive advantage. That's something that just based off of what I'm seeing personally in the market is probably going to increase over time. Curious, Mike or Adam, if you want to weigh in on that, if that kind of matches up with what you're seeing in general in the market.
I mean, for me in the market, yeah, I'm seeing some companies going all in, and then there's still some that are just treading lightly. I feel it really depends on the type of data that your AI is going to have access to, as to how all in you're going to be.
Yeah. Where would you? So sorry, Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, just here at LawVu, I would say that AI has become embedded, of course, into our workspace. And we have plans and visions to continue on that path, to continue making AI a tool to make lives easier and complete tasks quicker, regardless of whether that's in the matter management realm, contracts, or spend management.
Yeah. Or since December in the area of drafting and reviewing, obviously with the clause-based acquisition. Yeah. Where indeed I think which I think is very exemplary of the kind of very nuanced take that LawVu has on AI, right? Seeing the benefits for AI, seeing the benefits for more traditional automation technology, and just kind of like knowing where to pick which use cases. I think that's definitely going to be a key challenge going forward, right? Even as the AI increase is on the up. So moving on, I want to quickly get into some of your background, Mike, a little bit more. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of what you're currently focusing on at Samatus, just in general, bird's eye view of your role?
I mean, so I am not just the legal operations person, really, because legal is a support department, and many in-house areas have a lot of support departments. Typically, we are partnered closely with HR or finance or other departments in that sense. So, really, what we've been focused on as far as my role right now is just one, bringing order to chaos, um, making sure that the right information is being given to the right people at the right time, and herding cats. That is always the job of legal ops, making sure that do you have all the things that you need to execute your contract? Do you feel empowered that we've fully explained everything to you? However it works out, you're always wearing multiple hats when you're in legal ops. But we found that by partnering with these other support departments, you can kind of build a really good framework that everyone can build off of and support the rest of the organization with.
Yeah, that tracks with what I'm seeing personally also on the legal upsides. The herding cats, I think, in particular is a good one. Curious also, kind of, if you can zoom in a little bit on the work that you're doing with lawyers. I understand you're not a lawyer by background. Do you feel that makes it like trickier to kind of get into the mindset, or have you built up enough experience to kind of know how to herd those cats in particular?
Honestly, one of the biggest things that I've learned, or biggest lessons I've learned in life, is that it's never just process, it's always people. So
Mhm.
understanding how those two things interact. So, when it comes to how we work with the attorneys, obviously, I am definitely not an attorney. I never went to law school. I'm glad I graduated from a school. Those things are always good. But, it has definitely given me a different outlook. I think one, I was definitely more in the operations slash technology side of the world. So to bring that to typically what you see in a legal department, which is, I know how to use a spreadsheet. I'm fantastic at Word because I can format anything in any way. As an attorney, those things are always near and dear, but a lot of times they're not quite sure, what technology they need or how the technology is going to benefit them. So that's been one of the better parts of my role, is educating, and then showing again how we can take, what we would have called the Wild West of contracting, and turn it into something that is, a lot cleaner, a lot more practical, and a much shorter time span. Because we all know that in the end, somebody's always going to blame it on legal. It's easier to do that than to say, "Oh, I forgot to send you that contract last week to start looking at. But I'd also need it tomorrow because I've promised it to somebody tomorrow." So, again, those types of things where you're able to pivot because of an emergency, because your processes are so good and lockstep. That's again the mentality that we're trying to keep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very nuanced kind of landscape, right? You, on the one hand, you have those challenges of just managing people, process, technology in that order. But then also, like you mentioned, just formatting documents, a very seemingly basic technical skill, but one that speaking as a lawyer myself, like lawyers never really master, despite however long they may however much time of their career they may spend in Microsoft Word. I think that we also had a webinar actually on that very topic with the LawVu team a little bit earlier last week. I think we did. Yeah, it's definitely a varied kind of set of challenges. I think you can probably agree with that.
And I can attest to that webinar. That's a great session. So if anyone is curious and hasn't seen that yet, I think we can probably get a link to it in the chat before the end of this call.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on very quickly. So, Mike, we addressed this already a little bit briefly in terms of kind of, the challenges that you're facing. I'm curious, the broader business in general, within the legal team, within the legal framework, of course, how are they approaching AI and automation right now? What's already being done? What's still on the roadmap, so to speak? Just curious to get a general sense of that.
So we're in kind of three buckets. So based on that poll, we were the low end where we're still kind of exploring, and that's because again, we're a healthcare technology company. So obviously we're dealing with protected health information. So there is a lot of guidelines on what we can and cannot do, and what used to be the big topic after COVID, when everybody was looking for their force majeure clauses. Right now, AI clauses are the big hit of anybody that we've dealt with, whether they're a vendor, a customer, what have you. It's how are you going to use our data? So that has been, at the first and forefront of a lot of the things. But even internally, again, we have not wedded ourselves to lots of AI because, again, as the type of data and the restrictions that are placed upon us, we can't necessarily always put our data into things that may make things easier. So the hunger is definitely there at the company. The appetite is there. We're trying to find, what is the best levers for our situation? Is it homegrown AI? Is it AI under, say, the Microsoft license? Is it, Chat GPT? That's not going to be for us, I can tell you that. But again, what is the best way that we can leverage AI with the type of restrictions we have on the technology itself? So that has been taking a fair amount of time for us to just start really looking through, because I don't know if you've read, AI terms of use clauses recently, but there's a lot of them. That's a lot of speak. I feel bad for the attorneys who actually have to read that. It looks like Greek to me, but again, good that we have attorneys that can read that. And then the same thing when it comes to the automation. We use whatever we can that allows us to do that. So whether it's using, say, something like Power Automate, or using something like SharePoint or other avenues to get things done quicker. We're always looking to leverage those types of tools, whether it's in LawVu or another system that we're using.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to zoom in quickly on the compliance question that you raised. What are some of the ways that you typically deal with that ultimately? Is that like just to get the opportunity even, right, to play with AI, to experiment? Is that in the form of a sandbox, or is that just in the form of very dedicated vetting of any sort of provider that you work with?
It really depends on the situation. So there are places where we do have a sandbox that we would use different AI tools to try and mimic things that we're doing. On the other hand, we also do a lot of vetting. So my privacy team is always busy looking at terms of use, and again, with what we have to do with our data and the data that is given to us, we have to be extremely good stewards of it. So there's just a lot of a lot of things to look at to make sure that we're wielding AI the correct way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we talked a little bit about AI and automation, not necessarily as sort of two sides of the same coin, but as different ways to approach a problem, right? Is that something that you're experiencing as well, where you kind of, because you also have that Power Automate knowledge, for example, right, that you're able to kind of take a step back and say, okay, maybe we should be using this type of technology, maybe we should be using that type of technology?
Well, really, it comes down to where's your source of truth. Because again, everything offers AI. There is not a single technology, I think, that we have purchased in the last year that doesn't have some type of AI enhancement to it. And that's just going to be a given. You're not going to find, custom or non-custom off-the-shelf products that are that are not AI enabled. And when you think about it, you've been using AI for decades. I mean, if you used Clippy, the little paperclip guy from Microsoft Word, that was AI. Like, there's a million little types of things that we've used throughout our lives that technically fall under that AI realm at this point. So again, it's, how am I using that, or how are we looking at it? The new hot phrase being agentic AI. So, that's really taking your AI and your automation and turning it into the same coin at that point.
Yeah.
But again, where is your source of truth? So is your purchasing system and LawVu, and if I have an intake system, a technology intake system, all these different things that are all looking at, say, a master services agreement, who's right? Which one should I be using? For me, and for the legal team, it's simple. It should be whatever has been designed by, actual legal SMEs and lawyers and best practices. But again, if you're a company that is running super lean and maybe you don't have a legal department, or maybe you are just too busy, you might grab some of these other ones. And what if they start getting conflicting information? So knowing that source of truth has been that piece for us. And then again, the agentic AI, I think that is truly going to be the game changer for a lot of different things, because when you start automating, and as I said earlier, the death by 1,000 cuts administrative tasks, now you're really talking about ROI. Now you're really talking about time saved.
Yeah,
we've talked a little bit about, we've talked at length now about mindset and theoretical. I think this is a nice transition to the next slide, but Mike, I'm curious about, some specifics, what you've done at work to speed things up, either with AI or automation. And if you can get into your automation that you built with Power Automate with your purchasing tool, I think the field would appreciate that sort of story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the biggest things is, how do we save time? How do we do things smartly? How do we, solve for the problem, instead of just moving the little stones around the problem around? So, with Power Automate being able to tap into so many different sources, I was able to utilize that to take information from LawVu and other CRM products, purchasing products, and even ERP systems, and be able to take data between those two upon, some simple action within LawVu. So if we were to say, get our contract terms, I could push those someplace besides, just having them reside here, where somebody has to come and look and go, oh yeah, I got to go pay an invoice. What is my net terms with LawVu these days? Did I negotiate good for net 60 and I get to keep my cash a little bit longer, or did it just say due upon receipt? So, but again, when your finance team is segregated from you, because typically they're going to use their own systems, their own tools, and they're not your department, how do you get that information to them? So we were looking at ways to be able to push and pull data from various other systems. And again, by using things like API, you can tap from LawVu into other systems and back. So we've looked at all the different ways that we can take, for legal, the source of truth is LawVu. So how do we take our source of truth and ensure that somebody else's system has the right information in it? That was things like Power Automate. That is things like API integrations, and even using just straight up AI. I know I might be jumping forward, but one of the things that I've always loved about AI is asking AI what AI thinks about things. So, I remember when we first started looking at the LawVu AI to extract data based on AI prompts. And all I had to go on was like a couple prompts that you guys gave me back in the early access part. And I went, I have no idea how to write this prompt. So I just asked AI to write AI prompts. And you should have seen how many of my fields suddenly started being filled up based on it telling it what it should be looking for. So again, it's a little weird asking AI, how do you feel about yourself and how do you feel about solving this problem? But that worked really well.
Yeah, I think that story that you just shared will resonate even with a few folks that I know are on the webinar today who have used our AI extraction tool that recently went live. And to create those prompts, used AI, whether it's ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, what have you, to come up with better prompts and to iterate over time, ultimately leading to better results that can populate that source of truth that you spoke about.
Yep.
Mike, we've talked a little bit about the challenges, the operational problems, like just compliance as well, right? As one of those things that we do need to be mindful of. I'm curious whether you can zoom in a little bit on pitfalls in general, whether you can tell maybe a couple of war stories on and just kind of some advice for the people in the audience on things that lessons that you've had to learn the hard way.
Oh yeah, no. Again, absolutely can tell you AI is a double-edged sword. It's a wonderful tool, but to use one of my favorite phrases, trust but verify, is the main reason why right now, like for our company, or I can only imagine a lot of companies, turning over the reins to make operational decisions to something that can hallucinate even given perfect information is not where you want to be at. So, it's, I have a lot of wounds from fun AI moments.
Let's hear it.
I mean, I still remember again, early access, LawVu. I said, give me dates. It gave me dates so far in the future that I really thought that I was watching the cartoon Futurama. I was like, how do we get into the 3000s? But that's okay. So again, trust but verify. When we ask it, we've asked various tools to summarize things for us. As very interesting, depending on what tool you're using, how it summarizes the exact same data. And that goes to my point of where your source of truth is. So if I ask LawVu a question about a contract, but then take that same contract, upload it into some other AI tool and ask it the question, I get a very different answer. Now, again, same information, same contract. How does it come up with two different answers for specific questions like execution dates or interest rates for late payments? So again, there's a lot of trust but verify. Are your prompts really working? Yeah, grab data. Was it the right data? And then, one of the things that I think a lot of legal teams really need to look at is how do you spot check? Where's your audit at? If it saves you 30 hours a week for one team member who's going contract by contract, pulling data out so that it's reportable, okay, great. How many of those 30 hours are they going to then spend now validating that the data that was pulled was the right data? Because blind trust with AI is just foolish. You're opening yourself for more risk than you ever really would want. And then again, how do you enable your end user? So if I'm using, say, LawVu, how do I enable my end user to use that AI, and do I trust the information that's coming out of it to them? The answer is, yeah, I trust the information, but do I trust that they are going to understand it the same way? Whereas, again, if an attorney is sitting there taking, say, a summary from AI and then adding the nuanced flavor that AI is just not going to pick up, now you're talking about something because you've added value and you've spot checked the information that's coming out. So is it saving the attorney time? Not necessarily, but is it saving the time for the people who are prepping all that information for the attorney to review? Absolutely. So again, there's very common pitfalls of over trusting what you see, giving it the reins, throwing all your information in it and expecting AI to understand how to correlate all those things. It's a lot to ask because it's not a magic tool. It really is code at the end of the day. And somebody had to program it, unless, of course, AI is programming AI right now, which is happening, but we won't talk about that terrifying piece on this particular webinar.
Yeah, exactly. Mike, I want to zoom in on one thing in particular. I think trust but verify is definitely, sage advice in any sort of AI related capacity, like anywhere you're using the technology. But I'm also curious, how do you kind of build the foundational sort of readiness, right? Because trust but verify is kind of a responsibility for anyone who's using AI to kind of after the fact make sure that they're using it in a responsible way. But I'm curious, before any prompt is written, kind of from an organizational point of view, how do you provide that sort of base layer of AI readiness?
Well, really, part of it is you really have to have your control for the experiment. So I'll say, all the data that we've collected over, several years of contracts against what would or what should AI be able to give out to you. So, again, when you take into account LawVu, understands contracts, understands effective dates, understands a lot of those clauses. So using it to look through that document and then give me answers back, and then looking at our actual static control and verifying whether that is going to be right. That is basically kind of the methodology that we use in order to figure it out and make sure that it's right. So that is our creating the test case before we create the prompt, because when that prompt is tested, we should know exactly what it's going to give us. And that gives you your trust but verified moments. So, and then on top of that, we looked at, what level of risk are you going to allow AI into? So am I going to let AI make decisions about our customer contracts? Absolutely not. Not a chance. Now, will I let it look at all of the different lower level risk contracts? Absolutely. So, you need a hotel, or we're booking a magician, or we're doing any other kind of oddball thing that is not just par for the course. They're so low risk. Why not? The absolute worst that's going to happen is we'll pay a little extra money and a late fee, or we won't understand that, when we canceled, it was too late and we lost a bigger percentage of the money at that point. But again, that's money lost. That's not, to me, risk on the table for litigation or for contract, malfeasance, like all of these different things. So we looked at, again, what was the base level, what is acceptable if AI starts making errors. And then once it proves itself at that level, okay, now we take it to the next. So it's always going to be a trust but verify. But over time, that verification will become less and less because we've built that trust from stage one.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think you raised a couple of very good points there in general, just on kind of building that foundational readiness. I know that just from the poll that we did earlier, right? We still have quite a few people, even in the chat today, who are just starting to experiment, just starting to use it in isolation here and there. For those people who are really just taking kind of their first baby steps, or just really exploring a little bit like the outer edges of what's possible, what sort of kind of main points of advice would you give them?
I mean, you really need to understand what it is that you want. And I think that is the biggest thing. Is, again, I can open up my email right now and there are 30 different emails from different people claiming that their AI is either going to, cut back my redlining, or cut back on X, or it's going to find me new clients, or whatever it is proposing. You can just drown in the amount of AI that is out there. And like I said, whether it is good or bad AI, that's up to you to figure out, based on what it is that you're trying to do. But if you don't know what it is that you want, you're just going to be inundated. And that's going to lead to some very hard choices because everything is going to be shiny and new to you. So again, I look at what is the base core functionality that you want, and then how does AI enhance that ability? So that's really how you should be looking at it, because again, if you don't have any of those things to start with, uh, you know, having AI and automating just means that wrong things get to you faster. So, again, you've got to have some process in place, or at least have an idea of how you want that landscape to look.
Mike, what
Yeah.
about
Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. What about prompting? So let's say someone has nothing except an enterprise version of a mainstream tool today. How have you improved on your prompting? Like, what sorts of things, classes, courses, YouTube videos have you watched
Oh
or
God,
considered to improve your prompting? Because I think
please,
you're good at it.
please don't look at my internet browser history when it comes to AI prompting. I've gone down some serious rabbit holes. But again, it's weird because your prompt very much differs depending on what system you're using, what iteration it is, and even I know I'm gonna mess her name up, but the lady that we met with, who is doing the AI for LawVu, like I know that when I talked to her about AI prompting and how it changes and how we were using it, it was a very like, oh my goodness, like I didn't even really think about it that way. So from a prompting standpoint, one of the biggest things that we've done over time is, again, if you throw enough contracts at your prompt and it's still not getting it, how do you refine that? How do you figure out what is the correct wording? Sometimes it's something as simple as, hey, this is where it is typically in the contract. Like it always follows contract signatures on next page, if you're trying to tell it where to get signature information. So, because sometimes it's not always at the bottom. You might have exhibits, you might have other things. So, I think one of the fundamental stories of my life, and I've told this to my CLO on multiple occasions, is the peanut butter and jelly story, which is I had an amazing computer math teacher, and this gentleman went out and bought 30 loaves of bread, 30 jars of peanut butter, 30 jars of jelly, and you had to write out, as if you were a computer, how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I won't go through the whole story, but there were some terrifying results with, a knife being stuck in the peanut butter jar because they didn't tell it to unscrew it, or they didn't say open up the bag of bread, so he just ripped the bag of bread open. There's so many little nuances to that, and understanding like that you have to speak as a machine speaks, even if you're doing an AI prompt, has really also helped kind of hone that mentality of, okay, you're dealing with a computer. How does the computer look at it? It looks at it as pieces of data. How do I best say where to find that piece of data or what that piece of data means? So again, looking at all those things and then adding that little seasoning into your base prompt typically will get the result that we're looking for. But again, it's a lot of trial and error in some cases.
Yeah, a lot of trial and error. So there's this sense that because it's so easy to just type something into ChatGPT and immediately get a response, right? There's this sense that any sort of use case should be near instantaneous magic. But what I'm hearing you say, correctly so, it matches fully with sort of my own experience on the subject, is that it does take work to kind of set that up properly. It does take time and it does take effort. So I'm curious, in knowing that it's not magic and it's not just waving a wand, what are some of the sort of key use cases that you focus on when you know that you're expending all that time and energy and effort? Kind of where do you find your biggest wins, so to speak?
I mean, again, I'll keep harping on the administrative side, but there's also other pieces. But where I found that legal ops gained a lot of time back was again, I wish we had thousands of attorneys. I have two, and they work really hard. And according to LawVu, only 42% of their entire workload is contracts. The other part is matters. So they're doing a lot of things. So wherever we, meaning the rest of the team, can support our two attorneys has been one of our key focuses through 2025 and into 2026. Is again, less is more, but the juice has to be worth the squeeze. So, when we took into that account of what is our base layer going to look like, again, low risk contracts. So in the sense of, again, you want to book a hotel, you want a golf outing, you want to have, a space that's catered that we can invite other clients to. These are, again, low risk contracts where the AI tool in LawVu saved me a ton of time because I did not, be honest, want to look through the entire contract, which in some of these event contracts is 10 or 12 pages. Again, most of it is just talking about catering and event fees and things like that. But ultimately, what really matters in those contracts for us was cancellation. In case we cancel, where do we go? So instead of scouring through each and every one of these contracts, the AI tool, I'd ask it, hey, what happens if we cancel? What if we cancel late? Or oddly enough, and I don't recommend this one because it gave interesting results, but what is weird about this contract? Sometimes it gave me an answer, sometimes I just didn't understand. But, often I would take what it said, frame it into, an overall message, and then that would be my update to the business owner. So again, when we checked, it was pretty spot on. Error rate less than 2% out of like 50 contracts that we threw at it. And of the 10 or 15 minutes that it would have taken me to do all the different, write-ups and looking through the contract, it took about 90 seconds for me to do it. So times 50, I saved, 13 and a half minutes.
Mike, are you referring to the extraction tool or one of the other single contract features that we have?
I think it's your ask a question of the contract.
Okay, the Q&A.
Yeah, which again saved us a load of time. There are other AI use cases that we've been using as well, pulling out dates, because again, a contract is also nothing but dates in a lot of cases. So knowing when those things are happening has also shaved a ton of time off of my other legal ops specialist who's dealing mostly with contracts right now. So again, how do I get more time out of, that person or myself? That is where, AI and automation come in, because the process is there. The process is correct, but is how do I get that information from point A to point B, either faster or more enriched, or just, to take some of that burden off of an attorney. What are the things that I can do? So that's kind of, again, how we've looked at it and how we've used what AI tools we're allowed to use at this point to, get us to that end goal quicker. And has it worked? Absolutely. We've actually lowered the amount of task time it takes for legal ops, for privacy, and for procurement, which falls under us as well. But at the same time, our attorneys' turnaround time is shortening. So they're still doing more work, but they're doing more work more efficiently. So they're getting more done. And it's all because of, again, AI and automation.
So, Mike, you clearly have a couple of cool wins to point to, right? As you're just explaining, when it comes to kind of these use cases, when it comes to the return on investment that you're getting from them. But obviously, when you're just starting out, you don't have those wins. You don't really have a lot of like immediate returns that you can point to. That kind of first you need to obviously sell the vision a little bit of where you want to go. Can you talk a little bit about how that went for you, kind of when you were just starting out on this journey, trying to get people to at least give you a little bit of the space you needed to start experimenting, to start adopting where it made sense?
Oh yeah, no. Change management's always hard. No one likes change. You may say that you like change, but you don't like change, and your end users definitely don't like change. I can see that in every iteration of whatever we've pushed out. So, and that's to be expected. Like people don't want to use legal technology because they just want to sign a contract. So, you know, we looked at kind of what is the best of both worlds in our change management. What solves the need for legal, but also doesn't become so onerous that our business users go, I don't want to do that, or I'm not going to do that. Or, yes, I may get all the information I need from 30 drop downs in an intake, but if they don't want to answer and the business owner just picks the first item in each one to get to the bottom, I can't stop them from doing that. So, how do you find what works? And again, we found, it has to be a bridge. There has to be a little give and take. And part of it is just, finding who those stakeholders are. So who are the people that are constantly sending you emails? Who are the people that are constantly dropping by your desk or opening your office door or throwing Post-it notes at your face? Like, you never know. You're going to get a lot. But whatever, those main business users are, you have to bring them on that journey. You have to sit there and ask them, what is it that you want out of this? And when they give you I want my contract, ready and ready to sign. Okay, well, there's these steps that have to happen before it. We need some information. How do you propose we get that information? Oh, well, if I just give you this, okay, perfect. We'll make a field for that, or we'll, ingest an email, or whatever it is that makes them not go, ugh. And also gives your attorney, one, the information they need, but also that they're not making that same noise again when something comes in, because they have to do all these different things in order to just start working on it. So again, if you want to bring new technology or you want to change the technology you have, it's not just, Mike Bitko wielding power and making the change. You have to bring people along.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're coming up on time here, so I just want to quickly conclude before we move on to questions. Mike, we talked about quite a few things, right? We talked about trust but verify. We talked about bringing people along for the journey, knowing kind of where the limits are, knowing how to use the technology in what way, knowing how to work with the people that will need to be using the technology. I'm curious if you can just kind of for people, I'm curious if you can just summarize rather for people who are present here today, whether there are three kind of key conclusions, key points that you would like them to take away here. What out of all the things that we discussed, you feel like are the sort of most important things to remember essentially?
Absolutely. So, I mean, for me, it's three simple things. You should evaluate. This year, we looked at 26 other contract lifecycle management systems, just because my boss said, let's go take a look at it and just see what's out there. How does the AI landscape look? And it was insane. You had AI that was some of the most amazing task-driven AI I've ever seen. And you had AI that was so god awful that I was sorry for them. But really what it came down to was you have to evaluate. You have to know, again, what is it that you want? What problem are you trying to solve? And who's coming along on that journey for that problem that you're solving, because all those things come into what is it that you're going to purchase or implement or change. You need to evaluate whatever your options are. My next one is always pick your source of truth, because if you're getting your contract information from a spend management platform, you're probably getting it from the wrong place. So you should, again, evaluate whose data is the source of truth. If it's financial data, is it the ERP? Is it, however you pay your invoices? Is it, a budgeting tool? Again, there's a lot of different ways that data can come in, but what is that source of truth supposed to be? So if you're picking a CLM, what are the items that everybody needs from you? Those are the source of truth items. So you need to make sure that everyone knows that that's how those items are going to get there. So whether it's, you're pruning a contract to get information out of it, or you're doing a quick summary, because it comes from your CLM, your legal software, that is your source of truth. So make sure that people understand that, and that they know that that's where they're supposed to go. Because if they lose trust, which goes into my second one, which is my last one, which is trust but verify. Again, all of those three things, you evaluate, you figure out what your source is, and then you trust but verify. You got to know what you know. And you are never going to know what you don't know. You can sit there and say, I'm not really proficient in something, but out of 26 different looks at AI, each time I saw something new that I had never thought of before. So, and I'm sure that if I went back and started with the first company again, that's been a year now, their outlook on AI is 100% different than it was then. So, again, there's a lot of things to do. You're never going to make a perfect judgment, but you can evaluate, pick that source of truth, trust but verify, and you'll get as close as you're going to get.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Mike talked about not knowing what you don't know, and I think I'll just add one takeaway here, and it's that working with Mike, I've come to realize that he's been very, very generous with his time. And so if you're out there and not knowing where to start with legal ops, whether it's related to AI or automation or just the basics in terms of tooling and processes, feel free to reach out to us or to Mike. I know he's always happy to connect with anybody in similar positions to kind of help on that journey. On that note, I do also want to mention we have our legal leaders community made up of LawVu customers, but non-customers alike, talking about topics like this every day. So I'll put a link in the chat to that community, just if anyone's interested in checking it out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just to round things off, we've touched briefly on also recently, right? Picking your source of truth, kind of grounding the AI in a sort of a central source of where that truth is coming from. Adam, I'm curious if you can kind of zoom in a little bit on just some of the ways that we at LawVu are making sure that we can provide that kind of crucial underpinning for the best use of the AI.
Yeah, well, we put it all in one place. We put intake, matters, contracts, now contract drafting, review, spend management, insights, and reporting all into one place. And so whether you're a customer or not, or whether you have all of our offerings or not, I think you can just attest to the fact that LawVu can be an all-in-one workspace and that source of truth that Mike spoke about at length. And there's a customer quote there basically attesting to that fact as well. With AI, we've embedded AI into several workflows. So there are many on the contract side that Mike mentioned. We also have AI touching intake and note-taking in matters, as well as on the spend management side and uploading invoices. As I alluded to earlier, we're looking at other places where AI could assist, for instance, intake. And so happy to always chat about LawVu. I think we have many happy customers that are always willing to do so as well, like Mike. So we appreciate your time, Mike, as always.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually brings us to the final part of today's session, Q&A. To anyone who has questions, feel free to just post them in the chat or in the dedicated Q&A tab that you can see normally on your on the right hand side of your screen. We already have one question from Frank Keith. Mike, for you. Frank asks, does Samatus have a documented AI governance policy? If so, can you tell us about the experience of creating it and how it is being used?
Oh, my poor compliance committee. Yeah, right now we are in the midst of creating our AI governance policy, because again, the appetite at the company is huge. So really, it's been a lot of work of looking at what are our customers asking us about our AI governance. What have we seen our vendors when we ask them that same question? And then, what has the different outlooks of, our compliance committee? Because we have executives, we have different people from different risk areas in there. So we're all looking at that policy with very different viewpoints. Some are very pro AI, some are, if they could have murdered Clippy back in the day, they would have done it. But again, it is definitely a work in progress, and we're getting close. But if you want to touch base with me offline, we can definitely discuss the fun that has been creating that policy.
It matches a lot of other stories that I'm hearing. To be honest, it's one of those things where the technology is evolving so fast. A lot of jobs. I won't say I immediately see a lot of immediate job loss already, but definitely a sort of a job recontextualization. Right, people who kind of have to come to grips with the fact that the way that they do their jobs now is fundamentally being altered, and I think just that sort of foundational uncertainty almost, right, that does make it hard to kind of pin this thing down, especially when you have a lot of different viewpoints being brought to the table.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I've told my people, and I've also kind of mentioned this to many others, is that sometimes I don't feel like I'm a legal ops person anymore. I'm a prompt engineer. So you have to work that into your process. But at the same point, when you're talking about job loss, yes, I see areas where it could impact it in the legal department. But ultimately, one thing to look at when it comes to AI is that not everybody's using it and not everybody will use it. So, take one of the things I do where I have to submit documentation to certain government agencies. Well, I can have AI get that document all prepped up, ready to go. But if, quote unquote, Susie or John over at that agency doesn't have AI and it still takes them 12 weeks to go through my application, what was the point? I spent a lot of money to get something done, but because not everybody else is on that same level, I now go right back to where I was, which is waiting in line. So, again, it's people and process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it also kind of showcases again that we're saying that I like saying that I like something that I hear quite often is AI is the worst it's ever going to be. And in a week from now, right, we'll be able to say that again, and in a month from now we'll be able to say that again, and probably in a year's time we'll be able to say that again. And it just goes to show that progress is happening, but it doesn't happen at the same speed everywhere. So very good point. Like I think it takes time for these kinds of evolutions to also reach some of the outer edges of where maybe people are not really experimenting with it just yet, and don't really have any plans right away to start experimenting with it yet. I notice there's no more questions in the chat or in the Q&A, so I think this is probably a good time to wrap things up. Want to thank you very much, Mike, Adam, for taking the time, for everyone present today, for taking the time. Like Adam already mentioned, right, if there are any other questions that you would like to take up with us after the webinar is over, we are available online. You can find us on any sort of LinkedIn or typical social platforms. If you want to learn a little bit more specifically about LawVu in particular, you can scan the QR code, or you can just go to lawvu.com, and like we said earlier, right, there will be a recording being sent your way after the webinar is over. But yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.